starts like really early, actually.
Yeah. No, I feel you. I feel you. Well, it is 3:30 Eastern time. I'd like to welcome you guys all back to the daily briefing. It's good to be with you today. Joel is out today, so it's just Marcel and myself. As you can say, at least we're kind of taking the rounds. It feels like Marcel had a couple of days off. I had yesterday, and Joel today. So at least there's three of us. We can bounce off each other and kind of keep things going. It's good to be with you today, Marcel.
Yeah, my pleasure. I heard you fired me last week, so you know.
I don't know, Ryan Summers, man. He's a hard act to following you behind.
I don't blame you. It's a better option, actually.
Yeah, right. I feel like he's the Ryan Seacrest to your Michael there. You got to his follow up is pretty well.
Yeah. Well, we should.
I just want to do a quick announcement. Joel is out, but Confab is happening tomorrow for those of you in Confab, and we're continuing walking through the factors method. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about managing production with using a production rollup, which is part of the RevThink Creo S system. And Marcel, you're familiar with our rollup system. You guys are running that same system there too. So all those people in Confab are walking them through that process. So be sure to log on. And I know that you jump starters know that Confab is available to you. Feel free to jump right in. Yes, last week we just did a review. And this week we're getting started. So I'm happy to have you join us. All right, let's get into our topic today, Marcel, because I think this is something that is kind of important to you. You have a big heart and you're very thoughtful when it comes to being processing what it's like to be a creative entrepreneur yourself and then what it's like to be others. And you and Joel talked about negotiating yesterday. Negotiating is very difficult at this time, trying to figure out what the win-win is of processing. But for me, one of those things hanging over our head, especially with kind of the crisis at hand, and some of the situations that this put our business in is the anxiety, the overall global anxiety, and like our mental state, what it's like to be anxious. And I think there's probably a lot of anxiety just built into running a business today, but especially when reaching out to a client and talking to a client, it's hard. The stress is very hard.
Yeah, I agree. Especially now, I feel like anxiety builds up, and it's actually not, it's not like a flat, line. It's actually there's like a curve to it. So sometimes I notice that if I start reading a lot of news, my anxiety levels goes all the way to the roof. I keep like freaking out. Um,
Yeah.
and if I'm not reading a lot of news and if I'm just like focused on the stuff that I already know, so I'm like, okay, I have control over my actions. So it's easier for me. So I can navigate through the anxiety a little more. So it really depends how I set up my day. So that's exactly what I'm trying to do, on my end.
Yeah, I almost feel like the news cycle is like feeding on our stress. It think about how they promote the news and they create like this big, question part of the news cycle to get you anxious and worried about whatever the problem they're giving you for the day. Then they pile a bunch of data on you to tell you why the whole world is catastrophic and the issues that are there. There's some government official that's telling you how worse it is. And you can't even process normal things. So if you look out the window, you realize the sky isn't falling. Like there are things that are normal and good and beautiful and strong. And
Hmm.
we're not getting a chance to reconcile that. We're always just in that anxious news cycle if we tune into that. It's
Yeah,
horrible.
I agree. Well, I can bring you a little bit of like information. So I live in this neighborhood in LA that a lot of people like me, around like I have almost 40 years old. So there's like all these like 40 years old people like moving to this neighborhood, like creative directors, executive producers, all of that. So all of my neighbors, it's crazy because they all work in the industry. And then on Sunday, I saw them outside. They were all like 6 feet apart, but they were all like outside with the kids. And then I saw my neighbor start talking to him. And it's crazy how people are processing this moment because I noticed that my one of my neighbors, he's the EP of a lot of reality shows and like the big ones. And he was telling me, oh, all my projects are on hold, but I'm using this time to get ready for the summer. So in his head, it's like, summer will be on. So I can tell that we're all like in this limbo sort of like moment now, especially for them, like producing content and shooting and all that. But I can tell like not even him. And then my other neighbor works with audio for like a big, audio house in the West Side. He was in the same boat. He's like, oh man, we're getting busy, but I noticed that the summer will be busy. So all of a sudden we're all talking about summer. We all got pumped up, again. So it was like an interesting conversation I feel like having those sorts of conversation helps your anxiety level to go away because you can see that there's like at least data from real people talking about something that might happen, even though that's just like a speculation, but at least like having that talk, if you're feeling anxious, maybe talk to someone, talk to your peers, just, talk to other people. I keep going back to PJ. I mean, PJ. Massive, like, hey, what's up?
Yeah, good data point. No, to get out of your own head is great. To get out of your own echo chamber is somewhat even better. Like to get a sense of what reality is, how things are going for the people. I found that people are experiencing two kinds of stress. One is the jobs that are going away. Other people are kind of feeling the same thing some of your neighbors are feeling. Like the amount of work they're about ready to take on is starting to affect them, and that kind of big picture thought of like, how am I going to get it all done? Or even worse, how do I choose which projects over the other? And to kind of have to work through some of that strategy is affecting their overall presentation. And then when they're talking to clients, it's not coming out the way you want to. Like the conversation is, they're hindering themselves and holding themselves back from really what they want to say to clients, or even have the confidence to kind of win jobs or making things feel normal to them.
Yeah, and also like when I hear them talking, to me, I read the situation like, what do I have control with? So I have control over my own actions and like talking to people and getting excited about getting projects or getting, keep going with the company. But I can feel up that everyone is getting ready, at least like we're ready to take on when this whole thing I would say like goes back a little bit to the normal. Let's say that we are never going to be back in that normal for a while. But what I would say is like, okay, once this thing opened just a little bit, so are you ready to keep going? So that's my question. So I've been trying to get ready for that, even though that we've been busy with like, projects and clients and talking to people. So I try to keep myself busy all the time. But the question is, are you ready? Are you funneling your anxiety to get ready for this moment? That's, the biggest takeaway for me when I'm having this kind of conversations.
Well, let me share something with you, because I did some research about like what anxiety does to people and their thinking. And tell me if you can relate to this. This is from a Harvard Business Review article. And Ethan, you can take this link out of the document and post it for everyone if they're interested in this. But it says this: people experiencing anxiety made weaker first offers. They were more likely to exit negotiations early, and anxious negotiators made deals that were 12% less financially attractive. Do you find that anxiety does that to you? It makes you weaker in the negotiations? You want to leave sooner, or almost want to close the deal sooner because you're kind of so worried that it's going to go away. You don't let time play itself out. And have you ever experienced where your anxiety or worry actually made you take less money than you would have if you would have been in a better position?
Yeah, well, I can tell you that anxiety, back in, I would say like maybe 2 to 3 years ago, actually, because of anxiety, I made some dumb decisions, I was trying to lock in a project like once, and then I was very anxious to lock that in. And then I start like saying, what if we drop this cost? And I was working with my EP and say, what if we drop this cost? What if we do this? What if we do that? Let's get the project. And then finally we got it. And then the project was like a nightmare. And I'm like, oh my God, why did I do all of this to try to lock it in? So instead of being like less emotional about it, of course, anxiety is something that it's hard to control. And it's even hard to identify that you have anxiety,
Yeah.
But to me, I feel like it got me in a position that that's so true. It's not, especially because it sounded a little desperate, and then and then once you're in that mode, you're blocking all the indicators that the project can go wrong, or, this is not the right fit for you. So I feel like anxiety releases that sort of like, shield that you're just like this, you're like, okay, I
Right.
can't see anything. So I've been in that situation a couple of times, but now I'm, as I got a little bit older with the company too, I have the clarity sometimes to just say, just accept, sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm anxious to get this project, but I'm not going to do anything about it. Maybe let's sleep on it. Let's talk about it tomorrow, fresh eyes and everything. So it's again, learning how to navigate on that curve. But also I feel like what helps me, it's about the situations I have control. I keep going back to that and say, what situation I have control, what kind of like, you know, bullet points that I can control over my anxiety. And then I use that for like whatever situation I am to deal with clients or freelancers or whatever.
Yeah, it's such a great place to go back to, like, know what you do have control over. There's a saying that I like that says, he who does well with little, much is given unto him. And
Mm-hmm.
it makes me think about, like, when given a chance, what often we're feeling anxiety is losing control over the bigger picture. So we're feeling this possible sense of dread or loss or worry because there's a big problem instead of kind of dealing with the little items. So he who does well with little is the thought of, like, you know what you're supposed to do, just get back to the fundamentals and do it. And then the bigger stuff will come. I always like that part of it. But I
Mm-hmm.
also think of, like, anxiety is one of those things that make us weak in negotiation. So we often don't talk about it. We don't reach out to other people. We don't ask for help because it's a weakness, right? That's how we feel, like, oh, if I show my hand of stress or anxiety, I'm going to present myself as weak. So then we also don't take the time to find other people and talk about other things with them. I have a feeling the reason why you and PJ are kind of relating to each other right now is that you guys are thinking through this process together and you can be honest with each other. It's not often something we're always capable of doing.
Yeah. But I feel like, Tim, there's something about like I've been talking a lot about mental health, with my friends, and even like with some people that follow me on Instagram. I was in a rant on the weekend, like, all angry about mental health because I feel like there's a big overcome over that situation that mental health is going to be worse than the actual virus. That's what my head is going. But we don't respect anxiety in any mental health problem because it's not a visual problem. Think about this. If you have like an accident and then you break your arm or something, it's a visual thing, so you can see that there's like, you have a problem here. But mental, if I say anxiety, society actually, will criticize you for being anxious. Just say, hey, why don't you just go play some, sports, or just do this. Oh,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to be anxious. You're making a lot of money, so take it easy.
Yeah, there's a bit
So
of shame attached to it, right? Like, you're as if you're weak because you're saying you're stressed, you can't handle all the pressure.
it's just
And
because you
clearly,
can
this
see.
moment we have now is we're full of pressure. I mean, I think everyone I talked to is talking about how the lack of sleep that they're getting. This is clearly stress that we're all feeling. And we're trying
Yeah.
to use time overnight and spending extra time negotiating. And damn that PPP, man. There was moments I was filling out applications and I had to say to myself, okay, calm down. You know these answers. Just think through it, because my mind was rushing so hard to do some of this stuff, and it's almost unfair that we don't allow that to take place, and we shame each other for feeling that way.
Yeah, but again, it's because it's not a visual problem, so you can't see that there's a problem. But as long as you acknowledge, and I do that to myself, I know that sometimes I get really anxious about stuff. So I try to not get into that zone that I'm like freaking out or anything, because it every time I get really anxious, it's actually, it makes me to sort of like run in circles. I feel like I lose control over the stuff that I know. I'm like, dude, I know how to do this. So like, just step back for a little bit, go for a walk, come back. Okay, you know this, right? Stop. Close CNN. CNN is just talking shit. They're reporting the number of death, which is good. Good for them. They're selling more than right now.
Yeah, right. That's also
Close that freaking
exactly right.
website, close Facebook, close everything, focus on the stuff that you know, and then you have control over that. That's exactly what I try to do, with my anxiety.
Yeah. No, that's so true. Like I get out of my headspace, and I feel like there's big picture items that I'm missing. There's a term that I'm trying to remember who it was. Some comedian over the weekend was talking about hope shaming, and how he's feeling confident that things are good, and he looks out his window and things are okay. Then he gets on social media and it's all about it's horrible, it's bad, it's crazy, whatever. And when he says any expression of hope, the whole world is like, how dare you? There's people dying. Someone's kitty cat fell off a tree. Like whatever this stuff is, and he's just being bombarded by all this negative energy. When then if you could just go outside, if you just take a walk or close things down and go back to those good basic items that go back to reading that book or those good business books that have been waiting for you, and start processing through like a logical, legitimate way of processing, you'll kind of get that confidence back and know like, oh yeah, the basics are real. The fundamentals, the little things are important.
Yeah, but think about this too. So when you talk about anxiety, the word that comes to my mind, it's actually being vulnerable. Like when you're feeling not, you don't want to show weakness, right, at all. But it was such a great thing that happened to me last year. I did a project with Conan O'Brien, and I had the pleasure to actually meet him a few times, because we were shooting with him, and then we were on a brief session with him that he came and talked to us. And then I thought it was so weird to see the Conan comedian and also like the guy who is actually a human. So I could feel like when he comes in, he's like the comedian, even if it's a meeting about work.
Sure. Yeah.
But then he explains something to us later in that meeting that he's actually really shy, and he doesn't want to show that weakness. So what he does to everyone, because he's actually anxious and sort of like uncomfortable, he cracks a joke to make everyone uncomfortable in the room. So then when he feels that everyone is uncomfortable, he's like, okay, we're all together in this. So now I'm in control because everyone is in the same mode. So when you think about anxiety in times like this, you got to realize that it's just not you. It's the whole world. It's anxious, right? So that gives you like a little bit of comfort to be like, okay, being anxious, it's fine. We're giving you permission. When you're like, okay, I'm not sure if this is going to happen again. I am feeling the same way, man. And I have, projects lined up and everything. So we're all in the same boat. So the idea here is like, don't feel ashamed to be anxious, knowing that everyone is feeling anxiety too. I think that's where I'm trying to go.
Yeah. And just to remind people that you've been in this situation before. It feels different because you can name the crisis, but many, many times in running a business, you didn't know where their jobs were going to come from. And you had to work through the process and do outreach and reposition yourself and do some marketing and do some sales. So that's a very important part to remember. Like this isn't unique for you specifically. What's unique is that the world is perceiving things differently, and we have to talk about it in a different way. Mm-hmm. So, for example, one of the keys to negotiating that I find is really important is understanding that you have to listen more than you talk, right? So, and that key factor, that first kind of moments where you get a chance to put something out there and see how the person you're talking to is responding, it does kind of help you drop down that anxiety. Now you can relate to someone. Mm-hmm. If you think you have to carry the ball and give confidence and hope and understanding, and you don't let anyone else talk, then you're going to just wrap yourself up into whatever the position is that you walked in the room with. And you don't know if that's a position of strength or weakness. And people that are anxious, they talk too much. They're so afraid. They want to control it and they talk it. I love the story about Conan where he kind of like, he breaks the room and then it gives them a response from everyone. And then we're all on the same page and we can work together. So
yeah. And it's kind of because I use that technique when I do public speaking too, I was in Melbourne in December. And then the first thing I was like, okay, I'm the last guy to speak. There's like 1,500 people in this room. Okay. And then I cracked a joke that I was sort of like uncomfortable. Before I even said hi. And everyone was like laughing, but half of the crowd was sort of like, whoa. And I'm like, okay, now everyone's like with me. Great. Now I can just talk for an hour because we're all uncomfortable now, right?
Yeah, yeah, we're on the same page. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Here's some thoughts too. People that this is another quote from the article, which I thought was interesting. People with anxiety, they feel less confident. That makes sense. So they reach out to others and are less able to discriminate good versus bad advice. So when you're full of anxiety, and you are more likely to reach out to others, and then you can't really discriminate or decide which is good advice and which is bad advice. You kind of like take it all in as if it's the same. I find that an interesting fact as we are talking about reaching out to our clients, talking to our employees. Yesterday, you talked about having conversations with freelancers. All of that takes a level head, and you have to know good things that are important, that are long-term, that are strong for your business, and the bad stuff that just would sabotage. And if you're too reactionary, too anxious, and too responsive, you might be making bad decisions.
yeah, I agree. It's, and also, you know, knowing who to reach out to. So, for example, I remember this whole podcast thing, like a daily thing that we're doing. It started from one conversation that I had with you on my first day at home. I'm like, oh, I'm feeling anxious here. Who should I call? I'm going to talk to Tim, because I know you're not going to name things. You're just going to talk to me and be like, I'm feeling the same way, or maybe he's just going to listen to me and then we can bounce ideas. So it's really important to have that resource that you can reach out to, which is not going to be judging or, throwing you off. It's just maybe someone who's just going to listen and give you like some insights.
Yeah. And call people you've trusted before. Don't think that now there's a new crisis. Those people that you believed in before aren't there. Robert Maia, hope I say that name right, posted something. He said, regarding this subject specifically, I recommend to everyone this very interesting book I'm reading right now. It's from a South Korean philosopher called The Burnout Society. So there's a recommendation for people that are kind of processing this and thinking it through. There's another post out there too, I think might be interesting to share. But I like that. I like that there are resources out there. I totally agree with Robert. Like there are some great things that we can process, and Marcel, people we can reach out to that we can trust. The idea, I think, is to get out of our head and get back to the person that we know that we are. And that's probably my biggest position in all this stuff is you actually are the right person. You are put in your position at this time for this reason, and you're capable of doing it. I just want people to know that. And the time and experience that they've had that they can relate to, this is the time for it to come out. And then really to kind of position yourself in a strong way, to know that leadership isn't just something that you have as a byproduct of the job, but that leadership is required now. And all that skill and purpose and idea that you have inside of you, this is the moment for it to come out. So take that deep breath.
Yeah, that's cool.
I thought we kind of take the last couple of minutes and maybe just give people advice that we might have of how to get past some of these anxious moments. You've sat in boardrooms with people. You've had meetings with Conan O'Brien, for goodness sakes. You've had projects that have gone bad. And now you've survived the 2008 crisis and now the 2020 crisis. So I'm going to say that you have some good experience that could relate to this for people. I've already kind of thrown out one thing I think is smart, which is like listen more than you talk. So when given a chance to negotiate, have a conversation, when you're trying to move your agenda forward, which is a trying time right now to figure out where people stand. One thing that I've learned is that before I get too far into conversation, I have to get an understanding of what that person believes about the COVID crisis. I have one feeling, and I think my feeling could come across pretty aggressive if you don't believe what I believe and you believe something else. So that listening first and don't dominate the whole conversation, but listen before you talk or allow the conversation to take place is probably the first one. Do you have a piece of advice of how to kind of deal with anxiety in negotiations?
Well, I want to say something that my dad used to say to me, because you have to listen more than you talk. He used to say that to me. He's like, dude, you have two of these and one of these. You got to listen to double that you speak, so just listen to me.
I love it.
Used to say that to me all the time. So it's a good
Yeah, yeah.
advice. Now, every time that I start talking too much, I'm like, maybe I need to listen a little more, because I have 2 ears.
Yeah, my saying was, your mouth is between your head and your heart. So don't let one speak more than the other. Make sure you're speaking from both as it comes out of your mouth. Yeah.
That's a good one too. But to me, again, the biggest piece of advice to deal with anxiety, to me, it's actually knowing when I feel like I try to understand where the anxiety is coming from, the source of it. And most of the time, anxiety comes from the stuff that I have no control. And that's a horrible thing, because then I'm like, okay, why am I feeling anxious about this? Because I have zero control, like, over this situation, but I have control over my own acts. I can call my producers, I can call my EP, I can say, hey, let's all jump on a call and talk about a few things. And then all of a sudden I start talking to people and I'm like, okay, that's feeling better. We're all in the same boat. We're finding solutions. We're talking about things, or even like about projects the other day. We were just like reviewing one project, and then we were like, oh, but if we produce this project in a certain way, it will go bad. But then I was feeling so anxious about the whole COVID situation that I wasn't like seeing this problem here. As soon as we start talking about this, my whole anxiety went away. I'm like, okay, now I'm focusing here. I know how to do this, and I can tweak a few things here and there. And then all of a sudden we put the project back on track. So again, just focus on the stuff that you have control, not on the stuff that you don't have control.
Yeah, I like that also, like framing the problem and not bring on, you don't have to solve the whole world's problems, just solve the problems that are at hand. And the fact that you can bring in other people, bringing in those other people that are on your team are part of the process in solving it. You don't have to solve it yourself. I think too many of us business owners feel like we have to solve our business problems, our employment problems. We're thinking that the PPP is all our fault or all of our victory. And then, then we have these projects in house too. So you're right. Like the fact that you can channel the projects, especially when you kind of have meetings with others, it's easier to kind of channel the project too, right? The reason when we get together, so bring your team together and work through it, just allows for some of that focus. Jed Mortensen shared with us that his state, Colorado, just announced that they will begin gradually reopening businesses at the end of April. This caused a huge downshift in my anxiety, just to hear that there are some light at the end of the tunnel, even though there are still a lot of unknowns and about how this will play out. I think you're right, Jed. The uncertainty is what's probably been our biggest anxiety, is that we don't know when. We don't know how long to plan for, how long to store up for. If it was going to last 6 months, we have to make one set of decisions. If it's going to last 6 days, it's a different set of decisions. That's probably been the worst part of it. So I'm sure something like Colorado opening up is great. That's why I think I'm more of that hope-driven person. If you look at the real facts that are there in your business or in your neighborhood or in your community, there are some that still are severely affected, but others are recovering. And you should have the right to get out there, voice your opinion, talk to your Congress people, ask about getting back to work. I think all of those are really positive things to do. It is not, and I'm going to say it again, it is not saying that the hurt and the disease and the death doesn't matter for you to be concerned also about the economy, your growth, your business, the people you care for, the people you're providing for. All of that is built into it, and you have to take care of the part of the world that you're responsible for. As Marcel says, like, talk about things and start working on the things that you can control.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that this conversation has been helpful for many of you. I'm sure we're all kind of processing this together. There's so many parts of being a business owner that we know is stressful and affects us. When it comes to talking to your clients and to your employees and to your freelancers, we're also in a position where we have to get ourselves out there with some confidence, and negotiating isn't very easy under that stress. So my advice to you is just get back to the basics. As Marcel say, talk about things and control the stuff you can control. Use the timing as to your advantage, and let the world work itself out. And most important, listen more than you talk. Sounds like those are just some encouragement we have to you as you're kind of working through the stress. Marcel, any last words? You want to say a goodbye and sign off for this?
Well, I want to say this. So think about, I've been seeing a lot of people talking about the stuff that we're learning from the situation. And most of the people can focus on like, oh, we all know how to work remotely now. I think that's an understatement, you know? No. We're learning so many other things. Like we're learning how to negotiate. We're learning how to save our money. We're learning how to take a look at the cash flow. We're looking how to run our business a little tighter. We're looking at learning so many different things, you know? So just try to be aware of that and knowing that there is like a bigger lesson to learn, you know, rather than just like being remote, you know, because we can work remote, whatever, you know, even before COVID, we could do that. But I'm trying to think about all the good stuff that it's coming out of this. You know, there's a lot of good stuff coming out. Just think about that and focus on those, you know, the knowledge that you're getting, and just keep going.
Robert says exactly, Marcel. Yes, thank you for that kind of optimism. You're totally right. There's a lot of opportunity and growth happening because of this. It is a crisis, and we know it's there. But the world becoming flat and all of us kind of being the same and dealing with it together gives the leaders a chance to kind of rally together and step up. So very, very thankful. Thankful for you, Marcel, and the thought leadership that you're giving us and our community as part of this process. I appreciate you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
That wraps us up. It's 4 o'clock here Eastern time. Thank you all for being part of this today. We at RevThink believe in you, and we exist so that you can thrive in business, life, and career. We thank you for being part of this, and we'll see you tomorrow on our daily briefings. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Later.